textbook Trump. Like, I would expect nothing less from him in terms of a poignant press release about sexual allegations. I mean, I would literally expect nothing less. I mean, glad that's settled, right? Not his type, case closed. But in the CNN interview, it gets brought up in the CNN interview and in the MSNBC interview, the journalists, the hosts of the show, are basically asking her, legally what you're describing is rape. Why aren't you calling it rape? And E. Jean Carroll has said on every interview I've watched her on, explicitly say, like, I don't want to use that word. And she gave two different reasons on two different interviews. In the first interview I watched, she said something to the effect of, like, she didn't feel, I'm articulating what, I'm not quoting here, I'm articulating what I got from what I gleaned from what she was trying to articulate, which is that she didn't want to name it that because she named it as a fight. She named the situation as a fight. She didn't want to feel like a victim. She doesn't see herself as a victim. So she didn't want to call it rape. She named it a fight. Both correspondents basically said to her, legally what you've described is a rape and a rape attempt. And of the now, 18 women have come forward against Trump. So 6 have come out explicitly with assault claims, and the other 12 have claimed inappropriate sexual contact. E. Jean Carroll's is the, in terms of the details of her allegations, is legally would be described as rape. She doesn't want to name it that. And she was quoted in, this is the MSNBC interview, when the correspondent's like, why aren't you calling it rape? Or why are you uncomfortable calling it? She says, quote, rape is a conclusion that a man has had his way with me against my will, end quote. So, like, I totally get that, like, she doesn't want to name it and, like, have this victim mentality and all the rest of it, but I think there's also something bigger there, and it tied into, like, the Big Little Lies conversation that we had, which is, like, this fear of, like, calling a spade, like, and that insofar as, like, for me in my experience, like, I mentioned this ever so briefly in that video, that I have had an encounter which most people, when it's been described to them, it's very clear that it was sexual assault. It wasn't rape, but it was definitely, there would be no bones about it. I have a very hard time calling it that for a variety of reasons, but the main one is that by naming it that, it feels like you're putting yourself on par with people that have had much more intensely violent experiences. And it feels like almost like an act of disrespect for me personally to name it as such, because it's like, and of course everything's relative, I get it, but it feels like to call my experience the same as like this person's experience is, it doesn't feel right, because it feels more like this. And so if this is all that happened to me, you know what I mean? This is what happened to me, and then like something so much more horrific happened to somebody else. I know, like, it falls under the same umbrella, but it just, for me, I get like the whole not wanting to like claim that term or claim a particular term, because it feels wrong to do so, or like over dramatic, or it doesn't feel like the right, Like, there's no, like, name for every little itty-bitty way that you've been traumatized by somebody else, physically, sexually, or otherwise, you know? Like, on the spectrum of, like, you know, maybe somebody cupped a feel, you know? Creepy uncle when you were a kid, to, you know, you were full-blown raped, you know, or worse, or whatever. So it just feels difficult to name something, and that was one of the questions that I think bears, like, a larger conversation, is, like, why am I and why are we afraid to name it as such? And the most brilliant thing about Big Little Lies Season 2 is, and this is not a spoiler, this is not a safe zone, okay? Like, there will be spoilers. Nicole Kidman's character, Celeste, in Season 2 is continuing to see the therapist, who I'm so glad they brought her back, because she's one of my favorite television actresses of all time, and I have not seen the Deadwood movie yet. She better effing be in it. Anyways, when she's talking to her in episode 3, I believe it is, about Perry specifically, like, she's asking, like, why can't I hold on to the good memories? It's serving me, it's serving my children, like, why can't I do that? And the therapist replies and says, in some cases that is okay and that is good, in yours it's not, because he is your drug, you're addicted to him, and you're addicted to the chaos. And she uses the brilliant analogy of, like, vets that come back and have PTSD to the point where they cannot reacclimate to everyday mundanity. Like, they are craving the pink mist, they want to get back into the shit in the front lines because their brains have been rewired and have adapted to chaos. So this addiction to chaos, this addiction to abuse, in whatever form it takes, is just like a brilliant, it's just so brilliantly written and executed in Big Little Lies. But specifically, like, that notion of, like, because this is something I deal with to this day, is why can't I hold on to the good? Everyone I know, that's a generalization, the majority of the people I know and love that care about me, friends and family, have said that person that you know, even though this is not literally true, died. So you have to mourn that person as though they're dead. They don't exist anymore. Even though they still walk the earth, not the person you knew. The person you knew is dead. But I'm like, well, why can't I, like, remember the good? Like, why can't I, like, hold on to that? And I do. But that, in doing so, I most definitely, it has most definitely caused me to struggle longer and harder over the past, like, 5 years to heal myself physically, mentally, spiritually, whateverly, than if I had really just, that person's dead. They don't, done. Like, just done. They're buried in the ground. Don't exist anymore. Like, really, like, compartmentalized, put it on a shelf, put it away. So I still take issue with that. I think that you can and should be able to hold on to the good. Obviously, like, to the therapist point on Big Little Lies, maybe it's not the best option for people that are really, really attached to their abuse, especially somebody like Celeste, the character, who's still, like, self-harming because she's that attached to her own abuse. But what's interesting is, in literally watching Handmaid's Tale, like, 2 days later, so they're, like, a couple episodes ahead in that narrative, but there's a scene where June is talking to her current commander's wife, and they're having, like, a moment where the commander's wife is being open and honest with her and talking about, like, pre-Gilead and how he used to make her mixtapes, and how she misses the man that he was, or the man that made those mixtapes, because he's not that guy anymore. And June, Offred is basically like, literally verbatim tells her, I think it is good and it's okay to hold on to a sliver of somebody if that's all you have. So, like, it was just interesting that, like, within 4 days, like, these 2 episodes aired and they had, like, these kind of opposing viewpoints on this same situation. So I'd be interested to know, like, what people think about that, because I think it's a rather large conversation, and it definitely, we all know Handmaids is, you know, I mean, we're living it. Louisiana, Missouri, Alabama, some women have already died because, like, under his eye. So yeah, I just think that obviously out of 100 people, one person's going to be an opportunist, right? There's going to be a bad apple in every bunch. That doesn't mean you don't give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but we're still human. I'm still human. I still have a little bit of, like, a slight kind of skepticism when it comes to E.G. and Carroll, just the way that she, like, comes across. So I mean, it's not based in, like, fact or anything. It's just based on, like, my opinion of this persona that is or isn't authentic. Same thing with, like, Rose McGowan. Like, I don't doubt for a second anything that's Rose McGowan claims that has happened to her, but because of her personality, her persona, her mental illness, the fact that she is very clearly intoxicated a lot of the time, it becomes difficult to, like, tease out not the authenticity of what they're claiming or saying or truth telling, but just I don't know. I don't know, and it bothers me. It aggravates me that I even have to think these thoughts and ask these questions, because I really just want to watch Legion again. But man, I tell you what, it's just exhausting. But Leaving Neverland really, really, really did a number on my noodle, because I love Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson can do no wrong in my eyes, and I choose to believe that he, even in spite of everything that's come to light, I still do not want to believe, and I choose to believe that he didn't do it. And I know that I could very well be dead wrong, and probably am. So yeah, that sucks, and I'm sure there are people that feel the same way about Cosby, and obviously feel the same way about Trump, and I doubt anybody feels that way about Weinstein, but whatever, you get my point. But it's interesting, like, when the Asia Argento story broke, you know, she was one of the first people to come out with the Me Too movement, and went on stage at the Cannes Festival, like, a couple years ago, and she was, like, the figurehead of the Me Too movement when it started, when she brought all of this shit to light about Harvey and everybody else that followed suit. And then we come to find out about a year later that she was having relations with an underage boy, and had basically paid him to keep quiet. So yeah, it's just very difficult anymore, or maybe it always was, but it feels especially difficult now, and especially, like, taxing to have to, like, navigate and negotiate, like, your loyalties and facts, and what your intuition is telling you versus, like, what the media is feeding you. And these are, I'm just talking about people that are, like, a million miles away from me. God forbid, like, were somebody in your family, you know, like, I had somebody in my family growing up that did stuff that he shouldn't have done, but I love that person more than life itself. because that's just the way it goes, especially with family. That person is, in heaven now, or, hell. Probably heaven. But anyways, neither here nor there. I mean, God forbid, like, you have to navigate this shit when it's happening and with somebody you know and love, or your son. Like, imagine, like, what the mothers of these people of the accused are going through. Meryl Streep's character, again, with Big Little Lies, is so just on point, and of course brilliantly acted, and the